If you're on the healing journey, particularly at the beginning, it can be difficult to discern, am I making progress here? And a mistake people sometimes make is trying to gauge their progress by how they're feeling. It's like, am I feeling better? Like, I just want to feel better tomorrow. Very understandable. And if that's not immediately forthcoming, there's a sense that maybe they're doing it wrong or that they haven't grasped something. But in this video, I'd like to give you a whole list of signs of progress that are not so linked to kind of just directly feeling better in any given moment. But what's much more important is how your relationship to your experience is changing over the long term. If your relationship to experience is changing in these ways, then it means you're deepening and you're maturing and you're healing. And over that long term, you will absolutely feel better if you keep going. But in the short term, you can actually feel worse before you start to feel better. As you get more sensitive, as you start to connect to your feelings, more stuff can come up. Your patterns can get more intense as you're trying to let go of them because they're clinging on. And so there's all these ways that these feelings will get more intense, or the patterns more intense, you get more sensitive, and it can feel like things are getting worse and more painful. But actually in the background, you are maturing and developing. And so I wanted to really highlight that in this video. So the key change again is this shift in your relationship to your experience. So the sign number one is that you are going from a more combative relationship to your experience to a more curious one. So we tend to start off in this combative place of really hating our experience because it's painful and wanting to change it, and we're really strongly resisting it, and we're almost in this panic mode of trying to change and fix our experience. Again, it's very understandable, but this is a kind of rejection of these parts of ourselves because these feelings and emotions are part of ourselves, and in that rejection they tend to cling on all the more tightly. So if you're pushing away your sadness, you're not sort of fixing it. You're actually just almost bedding it in more deeply as an abandoned part of you, which means it's just going to be hanging around, disconnected, and intensifying over time. When we start to heal, we realize it's like, oh, I need to welcome in these parts of me. Letting go is always a welcoming. So our attitude changes to curiosity. What's going on with this sadness? How does it feel? Where did it come from? Is it communicating anything to me? What does it need? And this is the process where we start to bring these parts of ourselves back in. And that is one of the foundational practices for healing is welcoming back in these parts of ourselves. So you'll notice just a huge increase in your curiosity at what's going on. What are these patterns? Why am I acting in this way? Why do I keep reaching out for approval or for a drink or something? Like curiosity as to what is it within me that's driving those behaviors. The second sign is that you have a greater capacity to be with your experience. So we each have a certain capacity to be present with the emotions and feelings and nervous system responses we have. And if we haven't been taught that at a young age, that capacity might not be that great. And that's okay. That means maybe we can just touch into the body and the painful emotions it holds. Maybe we can just be there for a few moments. And then we notice that we start to disconnect from the body, that the thoughts start to come in strongly. That's fine. Wherever you're at is just unique to you, and that's exactly where you should be. But over time, as we start to connect to the body more and more, which is, really the foundation of this emotional healing process, in a way that's safe, that capacity will start to increase. So you'll notice that you're a little bit more able to discern what you're feeling, where it is in the body, what the emotional tone is, whether it's warm or cool, or all has a color, a certain shape. We're more and more able to discern this, and we're more and more able to stay present with it. Maybe just a few moments longer, maybe just a few seconds longer, maybe a few minutes. And over time, as we return to the body again and again, this capacity increases. So even if you don't feel that great, if you're able to stay a little bit longer with that not feeling great, that's a great sign of progress. Can I use the word great anymore? Probably not. The third sign is that you take the pause. So the pause is this gap or this moment in between your emotional reaction and your behavior in the world. So when we're not taking the pause, someone might trigger us in some way. They insult us, or they send us a rude message or something, and we immediately feel ourselves getting triggered, but then we immediately act from that place and we lash back out at them, for example. Whereas when you're starting to mature, you've got that extra curiosity, that extra capacity, that awareness we've been talking about, and you can take this pause where you go, okay, hold on a second. I'm being triggered. I'm being reactive. Let's just notice what's going on here. And you're able to step back and maybe take some time out to feel what's going on, become more aware of what's going on. And then, you can do what's needed, what you need, give yourself what you need in that moment to maybe come out of that survival state or feel some of those feelings. And then later on, you choose how to react and behave from that place. Now, this can be very difficult in some cases. I'm not suggesting you should be able to do this all the time, but you'll notice that your capacity to take the pause gets bigger and bigger over time, and that you can take the pause with more and more intense triggers. And so you'll find that if you're further down the line, in relationship, for example, you could get really triggered by someone, maybe it's your partner, but you're able to just be like, okay, I need to spend time with this. I'll come back to you later. And this is a great sign that you're getting less sort of reactive and more sort of contemplative in how you operate without denying yourself. Some people, they just without repressing. This is the key thing. Some people are very they seem very balanced or grounded in how they relate to people, but what they're doing is they're just shoving down their reactions. They're angry and they're just pretending they're not angry, and that kind of looks similar to the pause. But this is the legit pause doesn't push anything down to take the pause. It's like everything is there and you're still pausing to feel that and process it. Number 4 is that you don't take the stories of your mind at face value, but rather treat them as a pointer to what within you remains unhealed. So take this example, say someone sends you a rude message. There might be these stories, oh, I can't believe they did that. They're such a blah, blah, blah. The focus is all on them. The story is on the kind of person they are and how outrageous that is, for example. And there's a certain validity to that. I'm not suggesting that this person is an angel or whatever, but what's more important than that story, which you can come to later and sort of determine the kind of person they are and how you want to respond to them later, is that story is emerging from a sense of lack or a kind of a wound. All the stories that come out of our minds, all the projections we create, they all point back 180 degrees to some wound or lack within us. And you start to realize that that's more important. It's like when we get that rude message, what it points to in us is maybe, for example, some sense of, okay, I'm not being listened to, or that I'm not being respected, that I'm not worthy of respect. I'm worthless. I'm a worthless human being. We have this worthiness wound. This is just an example that was created when we were young. And when someone sends us that message, what gets triggered is that, that wound of, okay, I'm not worthy of being respected or listened to or whatever it is. And that's where we want to bring our curiosity. And then we can look towards that. And then later on, and this is similar to the pause. You're taking that pause and you're noticing, okay, what is it pointing towards in me? Because that's where you're going to have the most healing over the long term, is by continuously noticing, okay, this is pointing to this part of me, and that's pointing to that part of me. Whereas if you just get obsessed with the stories and to stay in the stories of the mind the whole time, you're never going to learn what it is within you that is actually hurt, wounded. And so they'll just, these stories will just continue forever. The next person will come along and annoy you or whatever. And you'll find that once you resolve the wounds, you get much less reactive to these triggers. Someone can send you a message and it's not ideal. It doesn't feel great maybe, but you don't go, this whole big wound doesn't get blown up. Number 5, you know that you are not one sort of homogeneous monolithic entity, but are rather made up of many different parts. some of which are contradictory, some of which are very hidden and unconscious. And you do your best to give space to all those parts, to let them be as they are. So rather than being like, oh, I'm just really angry at that person, and that's just how it is, you sort of have this subtlety of awareness to notice, okay, there's a part of me that's angry at this person, wants to push them away. There's a part of me that's really sad. There's a part of me that feels ashamed at the fact that I'm angry. There's a part of me that's afraid of being sad and expressing that and showing that and revealing that to people. There's a part of me that feels helpless at all these parts that are here and doesn't know what to do. And so you can keep noticing these parts, and the key is to give them the space to be themselves. There's a kind of an honesty in this. You're not looking for some absolute truth. You're just allowing the truth of each part to be as it is. So that the angry part is like, I hate this person, they're a terrible person. So okay, that's the truth of that part. And we can let it sort of be as it is in that context. The sad part's like, that person's really scary. I'm really afraid they're going to hurt me. And that's a kind of relative truth that you can let be as it is there. And the shame's like, oh, you don't deserve to be angry. That's not appropriate. Maybe that's the shame coming in, right? And you can give space to all these parts to be as they are, even though some of these beliefs are contradictory. Maybe the anger's like, I'm so worthy of being angry. This is ridiculous. And then the shame's, oh, you're not worthy of being angry. And the key is to give space to both. And you have that capacity to hold these different perspectives within yourself. Number 6 is you have a greater capacity for honesty and vulnerability, sort of true vulnerability. What I mean by that, and again, this sort of builds on the previous point, is that you're able to be honest about what these parts of you are saying. So sometimes if there's an angry part of us that's like, I really hate that person. We're kind of taught that, well, hatred, I'm not a hateful person. We kind of have this ideal of ourselves. I'm not a hateful person. So that's not part of me. That's not the truth of who I am. But actually, we can get more honest and be like, well, actually, there's this part of me that does hate this person. There's a part of me that loves this person or likes this person. There's a part of me that's afraid of this person. There's all these different responses. And we get better at being just really honest about letting these parts be themselves. Then the vulnerability aspect is we get less defensive about these parts of us. So in a relationship with your spouse, for example, if they have capacity to hold it, that's an important point. Not everyone has capacity to hold it. So I'm not suggesting you be vulnerable to everyone, but you'll find that your capacity to be vulnerable with people and express or describe what you're feeling, those feelings that feel scary. So maybe it feels scary to tell someone that you're angry at them. Maybe it feels scary to tell someone that they've hurt you, that you're feeling upset. You'll find you are more able to express these things in the sense of describing how you feel, relating how you feel to someone. Importantly, there's a kind of a fake vulnerability where people think they're being very direct. People are being very direct and kind of honest, like, I'm just being honest with you. That's not true vulnerability, because it tends to be that they're acting out in some way. So some people will be like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. That's ridiculous. I'm just being honest here. This is just an example that comes up quite frequently, right? You have this friend who's very direct and honest and tells it like it is the phrase people always use. This is rarely actual honesty or vulnerability. This is their reaction to what within them is true. So on some level, if someone's acting like that, it's because they feel uncomfortable, or it's bringing up some deeper emotion. The situation is bringing up some deeper emotion for them in some sense. Let's take an example. Say you start a business and they're like, oh, that's a ridiculous idea. That's never going to work. Underneath, there's some fear of failure, for example, within them, and they're having this angry reaction to it, and they're just saying, oh, I'm just telling it like it is. But it's actually what would be truer for them, their real vulnerability would be like, actually, I'm really afraid of failing. And so if I were, you're starting a business, you're taking a risk, is actually making me feel uncomfortable because it's triggering my fear. And I don't know what to do with that. That would be more honest. So you've got to be careful here. Number 7 is that you're more sensitive in terms of your emotions, but also in terms of what I would call your authenticity. So we'll start with the more emotional sensitivity. This simply means that you will find that for a while, even though you're processing and healing your emotions, more and more, which makes you less reactive in a certain sense. You'll find you're just much more attuned to triggers. So you'll find that small things in the world will actually trigger you more, because you're opening yourself up more and more and more. So it's just easier and easier to trigger you. Even as in the areas you've healed, you become less reactive. You'll find that, just little things will really set you off. And again, this isn't anything going wrong. It's just the fact that as you're healing, you're becoming more sensitive, more open, more nuanced, more aware, more conscious. And this gives you a real sensitivity to the system. You'll also find this in terms of authenticity. What I mean by that is that if there's a situation that doesn't resonate with you, you'll find it much harder to stay in that situation. So if there's a job that doesn't resonate with you, before you started the healing journey, you were able to kind of hunker down and just grin and bear it because you were kind of more closed, more numb, less aware of how painful it is, how out of alignment it was to stay in that job. Or it could be with a relationship, a friendship, a place that you live. You maybe live in a particular place. You're like, I can't live here anymore. This isn't my place. Whereas before you just kind of ignored all that. Now it's impossible to ignore because you're more sensitive. It's like, it just feels so wrong to be in that situation. It's like, I need to change. And so you'll find that this stuff empowers you to change your life in the sense that you're sensitive to all the ways you're not living in alignment with yourself. I know it sounds a bit new agey, but there is something to it. There is a kind of a sense of like, okay, this is the right person for me. This is the right place for me. This is the right job for me. These are the right clothes for me. And you start to move. It starts to become more painful to move away from those things, and it starts to feel even better to go towards them. Number 8, and this is kind of going in more specifically on this, is your relationships will start to change. This tends to go in two directions. Either they'll start to improve because you're learning to be more honest and vulnerable, authentic, and so on. And so your relationships will improve. You're also less defensive. You're not bringing as much crap to the table. And so they'll get better. Or they will transition into something else. Maybe you won't be as good friends with someone, or maybe you have to end your romantic relationship because you're changing who you are. And this is, again, the kind of sensitivity to authenticity thing. If that's not the right person for you, maybe they've been mistreating you in some subtle ways, and you realize that all of a sudden. You're like, hey, actually, they don't really respect me that much. And that doesn't feel good. And you then have the empowerment to actually start to change that. These are the two changes you'll notice in relationships. They'll either improve or they'll kind of transition into something else, right? So your relationships, this can be very challenging. This is a huge thing. Can be very, very challenging. As relationships change, can feel very scary, but it is generally going in the right direction. As long as you're careful, you're not deluding yourself and just using this as an excuse to to act out in your relationships. But that goes for all of this work. We can use all this stuff to act out in different ways if we're not careful. Number 9. This is a simple one. There's a Zen master called Daizan Roshi, I've been on many of his retreats, and at the end of every retreat, he would say, you can tell this is working because you're kinder to yourself and you're kinder to others. And I wanted to end on that one because it's very beautiful. I think that's a really great sign. That's just, whatever challenges you have, however you're feeling, whatever flaws you have, you're not living up to your insane ideals in whatever way. There's just a bit more space for kindness towards yourself in that, and towards others for their struggles and their limits. Being human is an absolutely insane roller coaster with no instruction manual that's incredibly painful, totally, utterly amazing. And we're all making it up as we go along. And there's a bit more acknowledgement of all of that and a bit more space of kindness. A little bonus one is that I find that you tend to fall in love with life more and more, with the whole process of this thing. You start to see it from a higher level and have a bit more gratitude for the challenges. Not without, not trying to suggest they weren't just incredibly painful, or if some really terrible things have happened to you in your life, not trying to, what's the word? Take anything away from how painful those things have been or how poorly other people have behaved in your life. But you start to fall in love with this whole process of healing and life itself. Maybe just a tiny, tiny little bit. And there's a bit more space for gratitude for everything that these experiences have taught you, painful as they were. hope that was helpful. If you want some support with any of this stuff, I work with people one-on-one, helping them to feel their feelings and work through some of this stuff. Take care. I'll see you soon.